Tehran on fire. America and Israel hit Iran's oil. A tower in Kuwait in flames. This is what modern war looks like. And another casualty? The friendship between the Prime Minister and the President. Donald Trump delivers another verbal attack on Keir Starmer. Trump tells him, "We don't need you." Iran is still firing at Israel too. We'll speak to Israel's president.
Now is the time to join forces together and make clear to the Iranians that it's over and out, that they can't be the rogue country that they are.
Iran's ambassador here in the UK warns the government not to get further involved.
We do expect for the other people, including British government, to be very delicate, to be very careful for their own activities.
The Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is with us live. Robert Jenrick is here for reform. And we'll hear too from the First Minister of Scotland, the SNP's John Swinney. And our team at the desk this morning, broadcaster Christiane Amanpour, former Conservative Defence Secretary Penny Mordaunt, and Zarah Sultana from your party, former Labour MP. Morning. Let's take you straight to the live pictures of what's happening this morning. This is Portsmouth. You can see the HMS Prince of Wales aircraft carrier on the left. That is expected to be made ready to go to the Gulf soon. This is Tel Aviv in Israel, where Iran has still been trying to attack, and Beirut in Lebanon, where Israel has been attacking. And the headlines this morning, of course, dominated by what's happening in the Middle East. The Sunday Times and the Sunday Telegraph both lead on the political aspect of this at home for Keir Starmer. Trump's latest telling off on the front of the Sunday Times. And Tony Blair saying that the government should have backed America from the start on the Sunday Telegraph. The Mail on Sunday also splashes on Blair's comments, but features the faces of Holly and Jessica, the two girls killed all those years ago by Ian Huntley, who died yesterday. That is also the Sunday Mirror's lead. But there are still good things happening in the world. It's important to remember that. We'll be talking to John Swinney later, just one of the many Scots celebrating what's on the front of Scotland on Sunday. Scotland's amazing victory at Murrayfield yesterday. So, a very serious situation. We're 8 days into this war. Christiane, Donald Trump having another blast at Keir Starmer. What is going on?
It's hard to know. We don't know. I don't know whether Britain is formally at war right now. But to be fair, the US and Israel have so much firepower there and they're already well into it. The most important thing to say today, 1 week afterwards, is that the goals are still unclear and the military strategy, which may or may not be considered successful, has collided with reality. I believe Israel thought that killing Khamenei and all the leadership at the very beginning would cause the regime to fracture. That hasn't happened, although I know they want that to happen.
And we'll hear it later from a member of the Iranian regime, the Iranian ambassador. But Penny, in terms of the politics for the government's trying to take a very careful line, supporting America in one sense, having RAF jets in the sky, intercepting Iranian drones and missiles. Your party wants them to go much further.
Look, it is ridiculous that the President of the United States, our most important security partner, is a secondary audience to the Prime Minister than his own backbench MPs. And a lot of what we have seen over this last week, the basing row, for example, was a confected row to appeal to Labour backbenchers. There's no operational reasons why you couldn't, even if we were involved directly in the action, you couldn't divide up particular actions, and we were always going to have to use those bases for defensive capability.
But hang on, the government was making quite a clear point that they didn't seem sure about the legality of the operations that Israel and America were going to undertake. Well, here you have it.
This is the crux of it, because process is more important to this Prime Minister than outcome. And you saw this again in his weakness with his own National Security Council. We know from the leak that happened. He was content to secure what he thought was the wrong outcome rather than change the process. And if you have a Prime Minister that is weak at home, you have a Prime Minister that is weak on the international stage.
But in terms then of his relationship with Donald Trump, Zarah, I mean, you're somebody on the left who thinks that Keir Starmer shouldn't have been as friendly with Donald Trump in the first place. If you look at Trump's tweets, are you pleased that Donald Trump seems to be falling out with Keir Starmer?
I mean, it doesn't come as a surprise. Trump falls in and out of friendships with everyone around him. What annoys me is Keir Starmer not having a clear position. Initially, he said he wasn't going to get involved, only to U-turn days later and provide UK bases to the US. He says the UK is not directly involved, but American planes and jets are leaving from UK soil to bomb Iranians. We are involved. He is gaslighting the nation, and he has not learnt the lessons from 2003 that when we get involved in the US's illegal wars, there are consequences for the rest of the world to pay.
So much to talk about with the three of you this morning, and let's just recap what has been going on. We are just over a week since the beginning of this war. But the reason Israel attacked and the reason Iran is fighting back is a clash over Israel's right to exist and the Iranian government's ambition to keep control. It's a battle over the past, but also a contest for the future of a region of the world which, even if it feels far away, affects you and me. Our safety, the price of oil, therefore the price of everything, and who Britain's friends are around the world. That point seems in question this morning, with the American president seeming to wage a one-sided war of words on Keir Starmer. And of course, the human toll is mounting. More than 1,000 Iranians have been killed, hundreds in other parts of the region, and we'll hear later from the United Nations that hundreds of thousands of people are already displaced and on the move. The government here is trying to tread a tricky line. It didn't support America and Israel's first attacks, but RAF jets are shooting down Iranian missiles and drones. And sophisticated American bombers have arrived at RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire, from where we are expecting that they will be taking part in strikes on Iran. The UK is perhaps both in and out of this war. Let's talk to the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who joins us this morning. Thank you for coming in. I just want to show you first. This is what our supposed closest ally said about the UK last night. Donald Trump said, "We don't need people that join wars after we've already won." You're our chief diplomat. What's your response to Donald Trump today?
Well, the job of the British Prime Minister is to take decisions in the UK national interest, not in the interests of any other country, but in the UK's national interest. That's what Keir Starmer has done every step of the way, both in terms of the initial decision not to be involved in those initial strikes that took place, and also in the decision to provide defensive support when we see Iranian strikes on partner countries where British citizens are residing. Those are decisions in the UK's national interest. And it won't surprise you that obviously we don't agree with President Trump on every issue.
But what's your message back to him? I mean, he is publicly, for the whole world to see, telling off the British Prime Minister. This is meant to be our closest ally. What do you say to him?
Well, again, I would say that this is about what's in the UK's interest. It's for the US president to decide what he thinks is in the US national interest, and that's for him to do. But it is our job as the UK government to decide what's in the UK national interest. And that doesn't mean simply agreeing with other countries or outsourcing our foreign policy to other countries. We have to be able to take those decisions. Of course, we have a long, deep, important security partnership with the United States, but we also have some issues where we disagree in the British interest.
But we've seen these pictures here of President Trump and Keir Starmer laughing and joking as they did in the Oval Office, the King handing over this invitation to come and have tea with the King. This is a public and serious spat between the Prime Minister and the man who's meant to be our closest ally.
Well, you'll forgive me that I focus on the substance rather than on social media posts, and I've learnt this long enough to know.
So should we ignore him? Should we just ignore what
social media
Donald Trump
post?
says?
If you follow every single social media post, you spend an awful lot of time doing social media posts in response.
Well, the president seems to spend a lot of time doing social media posts. So should we ignore it?
I think the substance we should concentrate on is what is the right thing to do. There is obviously a very serious conflict now underway in the Middle East, in the region, and we've seen these strikes continuing from the Iranian regime on so many different partner countries. It's why we're providing the Typhoons, the F-35s, the jets to the region, and air defences, strengthening air defences as well. It's also why we're working immensely hard to help British citizens return home from the region despite all of the airspace and restrictions that are in place at the moment. It's that substance I think we should focus on, because that's the most important thing to the UK.
But the relationship between leaders does matter, does it not? And in fact, the government has been highlighting how good a relationship Keir Starmer has with Donald Trump for many months, telling us that only Keir Starmer has been able to get such a good deal with the Americans because he's got a personal relationship. That seems to be in trouble. Do you deny their relationship's in trouble?
Well, of course, our countries work closely together, and of course the Prime Minister works closely with the President on a whole series of issues.
He must
and you're
be furious about
There's
this.
issues around the tech partnerships, around trade, on a whole series of different things, as well as our ongoing security partnership will continue to do so.
Doesn't the evidence suggest, though, that actually Donald Trump might have a point? And your former leader, Tony Blair, also told an event this week that actually the UK should absolutely have been alongside the US from the start.
Well, I know there are some people in politics who think that we should just unquestioningly agree with the US, whatever. I know there are also some people in politics who think that we should never agree with the US and we should never go along with anything, any joint action.
But what do you
I just
say to
think
Tony
neither
Blair,
of those
your
things.
former
well,
leader?
this is my point.
You were a
to
minister
him.
in his government.
Yeah,
What would you say to him?
And this is my point to him. I don't understand there are people who think we should just unquestioningly do so, and that I just think is not in the UK's national interest. I also think, having been a minister in the last Labour government, I also think it is important to learn lessons from what went wrong in Iraq, and to recognise whether that is about ensuring that the purpose for any action that the UK becomes a part of, and just recognising that all of our decisions need to be about what is right for British citizens and in the UK's national interest. No other country would say, look, we want to just outsource our foreign policy. Everyone would say that actually what you need to do is to take decisions ourselves. That's what Keir Starmer has been doing. And I think he's right to stand up for Britain and Britain's interests.
But whether it is Donald Trump or Tony Blair or other people whose assessment you might not agree with, is there not a point that the UK has responded slowly here? You know, 7 days ago, the Defence Secretary sat in that chair and told everyone watching that the UK was not involved and was not involved in these strikes. By the end of that day, the Prime Minister had popped up and said, oh, actually, America can use our bases. And if anybody really wants evidence of the slowness of response, you were told that this attack was likely weeks ago, and the ship that's meant to protect Cyprus, HMS Dragon, is, as we speak, still in the dock in the United Kingdom. You have been slow, have you not?
So I think there's two separate issues there. The first of all is that...
No, this is the issues about the speed of response.
And I want to deal with each of them. So you've got, I think, two issues about the nature of the response. The first thing, I think, is that these were two separate decisions about not providing the support or being involved in the initial strikes that the US and Israel took. And we had also continually argued that we wanted to see the negotiations, the diplomatic processes continue. Those were difficult, and don't get me wrong, those were difficult, but we were pursuing those. So there was a first initial decision. Then, once we saw the reckless nature of the Iranian response, which frankly shocked all of the countries across the Gulf who are now being targeted, I mean, they were shocked by the nature of the Iranian reaction, then it was right to respond to that targeting by Iran against partner countries. There's a second question that you asked, though, about the military response and the nature of the defensive response. So I think, as the Defence Secretary told you last week, we had actually pre-deployed fighter jets, Typhoons and F-35s, air defence radar to the region, to Cyprus, and strengthened support in Qatar,
but the ship
including...
to protect Cyprus is still in the dock in Portsmouth.
Well, the most important...
Still there.
The most important thing, I think, has been that those fighter jets that are already in operation, and the 400 additional personnel that we pre-deployed before this conflict started. Since then, since the conflict, you're right, we are preparing HMS Dragon to go to the region, and we've already now deployed additional Typhoons, additional Wildcat helicopters on air defences as well.
HMS Prince of Wales, are you sending the aircraft carrier to the region?
So I won't comment on further operational issues.
Well, you've just told us about some operational
But there's the decisions that have been taken.
I'm
telling you about the decisions that have been taken that are in place. Obviously, you'll also may be aware that as part of the Munich security speech, the Prime Minister announced the carrier strike group would be heading to the High North. There are obviously a range of security issues we face. So,
hasn't the government actually put the UK in the most awkward position of all? We're neither taking part in this war in the wholehearted way that some of our closest allies would want us to, but you're also facilitating the war in a way that many people watching will think is dangerous and wrong.
But I think that reflects the complexity and the reality of the kinds of security issues we face. And I think most people across the country know these things aren't, there's not just a sort of simplistic world out there that we can just pick and choose from and think that all of our decisions are easy.
Are we at
the reality is that it is complex, the situation that we are facing. So, of course, we didn't provide the support for the initial strikes that took place, but we are responding and taking action, including military action, to provide defensive support to partner countries.
Are we at war?
Because that's the right thing to do.
Are we at war?
Well, we are providing defensive support in a conflict, and that is, I think, the way to describe it. We want resolution.
At war, or we are at war?
We want to see resolution of this conflict as swiftly as possible, but we are, and our armed forces, our RAF, who are doing an excellent job, and I pay tribute to the work that they do. They are flying defensive strikes, including they have taken strike action against the drones and attacks that those countries are facing.
And for the record, Foreign Secretary, do you deny that at the beginning you objected to America using British bases for these attacks?
So I think that you're trying to get into discussions of the National Security Council, which I am not going to comment on.
It's been widely reported that you objected.
I will tell you,
deny that for the
I will
record
tell you
or
my
not?
view. I strongly support the Prime Minister's decisions and the decisions that he has taken, and have supported them throughout. That is my strong view. I think he has taken the right decisions in the UK national interest, and that, I think, is what the British public would expect.
Foreign Secretary, thanks very much indeed for coming in on an important and very busy day, no doubt, for you. Thank you for your time. Well, just before we came on air this morning, we spoke to Israel's President, Isaac Herzog.
We have seen information and very sensitive intelligence that now is actually quite confirmed by many partners that the Iranians were working on both sides, meaning on the one hand, moving quickly towards a 20,000 ballistic missile storage and preparation for launching, and most importantly, through other installations rushing to the bomb. Now, the issue is that there's a given moment from which you can't reach those sites. And that is why it was taken jointly between us and the Americans that we should move swiftly to remove this threat.
But the United Kingdom is not at all convinced in government that you had the legal right to do this. There is now chaos and danger across a whole region, and Iran was at the negotiating table when you began this attack. How can you justify that?
You know, there's these questions that I get repeatedly from British press, mostly, about the legality of the action. It's quite amazing when you think about the fact that Iran did not adhere to any rule of international law. And your own Prime Minister mentioned that in the last year only, there were way above 10 events or 20 events for which are suspected as terror attacks of Iran in Britain. You ask yourself why? Why do they have to attack Britain in the last year only? They've done that all over the world with their empire of evil, with their proxies, violating every rule of law, and just 2 months ago killing about 50,000 of their own citizens just like that. So to ask about the legality of an action which is clearly self-defense, which is not only self-defense for us, but self-defense for Europe, for Britain, for the entire region. Look how they're bombarding all their neighbors. And the fact is that they have violated international law by attacking your own base in Cyprus mind boggles me that this is the focus rather than on the future of the Middle East and doing peace in the Middle East.
But many people in many democracies around the world think that having a framework where there are rules for democracies to obey still matters. And you have been expanding this war. You have attacked Lebanon again. Hundreds of people have been killed and thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes. Why does Israel have the right to start dropping bombs on another sovereign country beyond Iran?
Here's another unbelievable question. We didn't do that. We were attacked vehemently by missiles from Lebanon, from Hezbollah, when the sovereign Lebanese government says that they object to it totally, but they don't have the power to do it. We're doing their work for them.
Hundreds of civilians are suffering in Lebanon.
Don't you understand that there is an empire of evil means proxies armed to their neck with billions of dollars of Iranian people's money simply to create havoc, terror, pain, bloodshed all over the world and in our region. Unfortunately, this is a true tragedy. There was an agreement signed with Lebanon, a ceasefire with Hezbollah just a year ago, okay? And they violated it. All of a sudden, of course, under the instruction of the Iranians, of course, they sent dozens of missiles on Israel, and they keep on doing it on the hour, every hour, all the time towards our northern border and the rest of the country. So we have the full right to defend ourselves and attack the sites of their headquarters in the Dahia neighborhood in Beirut, where everybody knows their headquarters is situated.
You are striking military targets, but also infrastructure and now oil refineries. We've seen dramatic pictures of oil refineries on fire in Iran. Donald Trump says the war is over. Do you agree with him?
I didn't hear him saying the war is over. I heard him saying that he expects full surrender by Iran. What we are aiming for is very clear objectives. One, Iran cannot have nuclear capability, and they were rushing again to that capability. Number two, their long-range missiles. It's also a golden opportunity for the people of Iran to rise up and bring change. We leave it up to them. But I think that anybody who seeks freedom and liberties around the world, and definitely in Europe, should rise up and support this effort. Clearly support, because for a generation plus, Iran has been spreading terror and havoc all over the world. And I think now there's a coalition of nations in the region who says to Iran, it's over, out, unacceptable, supported by President Donald Trump and his immense leadership. We're doing this for the well-being of the entire free world, Europe being the first one.
But Donald Trump has said this war is already won. And what happens if people in Iran do not rise up? It might be rather hard for them to rise up when there are bombs falling on their heads.
So we are saying, of course, it's an opportunity for them. We hope they will rise up. I saw incredible pictures of protests in London of Israelis and Iranian expats together celebrating this possible change, and all over the world, by the way. It is an opportunity to bring a better future for the Middle East and a different trajectory in the Middle East.
Donald Trump said that America doesn't need the UK and Keir Starmer. Is he wrong?
So I don't want to get involved in the relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom.
But is there something going wrong in that relationship?
My father fought as a high-ranking officer in World War II in His Majesty's government, in His Majesty's military, and liberated Europe from the Nazis. Britain knows when to fight and how to fight when needed. It's not for me to give grades and marks. And I'm truly aware of all the traumas of the last generation. Yet, right now, it is clear, and I can tell you inherently, I've met so many British prime ministers in the last generation and leaders, and they all spoke about Iran. And they all agreed that Iran is the biggest danger to the free world. So now is the time to join forces together and make clear to the Iranians that it's over and out, that they can't be the rogue country that they are.
President Herzog, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Jerusalem this morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's rare anyone from the Iranian regime agrees to an interview. Rarer still that that government apologises for any of its behaviour. This weekend, its president did say sorry for the disruption caused to its Gulf neighbours, including strikes on homes, hotels and airports. And the Iran's representative here in the UK accepted our request to sit down and take questions. We were invited to go to the embassy yesterday, the historic building in London's Knightsbridge, the site of the dramatic siege back in 1980. But with attacks continuing on both sides, after Iran's president said sorry, we wanted to know what his words actually meant. Your president has apologised for lashing out across your neighbours in the wider Middle East, endangering millions of civilians. Will you stop your attacks on military bases in other parts of the Middle East outside Israel?
It depends on the activities of the American side and Israeli side. It depends on them. The aggression of the American side and the Israeli regime is continued. There is no doubt we will defend ourselves. And if they want to use from this military basis, although that we do not want to do that, there is no doubt. Certainly we will defend ourselves accordingly.
If British jets shoot down Iranians' missiles or drones, are they legitimate targets?
You know, British government mentioned that they do not involve with this aggression. And so it is very important for us. But if they want to attacking us, there's no doubt that Iran will going to have your own right for self-defense. But I do believe that the British government has very, very good experience from Iraqi invasion, and as well as they know the illegality of this aggression.
And yet the British government is allowing American jets to use British bases for attacks, and British military assets are being used to intercept Iranian attacks. In those circumstances, are British military assets legitimate targets?
We are trying to have a very functional and very delicate and careful activities.
You've been lashing out right across the Middle East to all sorts of countries, endangering civilians across a whole region.
We are defending ourselves. This is a very important. Who started this war? American side and Israeli regime.
But you say the root causes
but they are using their bases, military bases from the Persian Gulf countries. Okay, that would be a very important, legitimate target for us. We do not want to go to attack anybody. No, we are very delicate. We are very, very careful regarding for our activities, and as well as we do expect for the other people, including British government, to be very delicate, to be very careful for their own activities in the name of the self.
You say, Ambassador, that what America, what Israel, what some other members of the international community would say is the root cause here, is Iran's refusal for many, many years to abide by the rules that the international community has set them, to cover up some of its nuclear ambition, and indeed to run a repressive government that oppresses many of your own people, and to threaten Israel using other satellite groups across the Middle East.
In international community, we have very important rules and standards in the name of international law.
And those which have been ignored by Iran over successive years.
No, not at all. Iran, as a member of the NPT, Israel is not. Iran, as a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, is a responsible state. They want to use the nuclear activities, nuclear energy, only for the peaceful means.
You have ignored many international obligations. Just last year, the nuclear authority...
Give me one of them. Yeah. Please, give me one of them.
Last year, the International Nuclear Authority said Iran had breached the rules. In 2019, it was revealed that you had stockpiled more uranium than you needed. Way back in 2002, it was revealed you had secret nuclear sites, and you have been enriching uranium at a rate well beyond what's needed for civilian purposes. You know that, Mr. Ambassador.
Let me answer to you.
You know that.
Yes, let me. All of the nuclear activities of Iran is under the monitoring of the IAEA. There is no any ambition to go to nuclear bomb.
Your country is under attack, but your people have also been under attack. Since we last spoke, your government has killed thousands of its own people in the streets who had the courage to stand up to protest against the suffering that they have been experiencing at the hands of the regime. Thousands of people were killed. How on earth do you justify that, Ambassador?
The Iranian side has their own problems due to the economic sanctions against us. And the Iranian people, unfortunately, has their own problems, in this matter. But I do believe, yes, now our people are in a very painful and sensitive period of time, but they are supporting the government against the foreign invader, foreign aggressors.
To say,
you see, if you go to the inside of Iran, you can see one solidarity, one unity among the people.
Ambassador, we would love to be able to report independently from inside Iran to see what is really going on.
Why not?
But we have seen much of what has gone on. Just this morning, I looked at many of the images and watched some of the videos from what happened to protesters in your country in January. I looked at images and videos verified independently by our colleagues at BBC Verify that show body bags littered over the courtyard of a mortuary, the Karizak Forensic Medical Center in Iran. I saw images of young, old, teenagers, people killed by your government, beaten faces, bloodied bodies, gunshot wounds. How on earth do you justify that and sit there today saying, our people have some complaints? Your government killed thousands of their own people and the world saw that.
Laura, I recommend you to be very vigilant and delicate for
and our colleagues have verified those images independently, Mr. Ambassador.
Of Iran. Let me finish. And so I do not want to say that we do not have any problem. No. The problem there are in our country, but you see that how to address these kind of problems according to the Iranian laws and regulations, it's a very important. And the other than without any interference of the foreign countries against Iran.
This was not about foreign interference. This was about your own people taking to the streets to protest against their suffering. And if you had nothing to hide, why turn off the internet during the protests? If you had nothing to hide, why not allow people to report freely and fairly?
Because the internet now using as a military devices against the Iranian security. You should be very delicate regarding for the Iranian circumstances and condition in Iran.
Our colleagues at BBC Verify have checked all of that incredibly carefully, and that is why we wanted to put that to you today, Mr. Ambassador. How does this end? How can your people find peace?
Iran is one of the peace lover country, and I hope that you recommend this kind of activities to somebody made this kind of aggression against these people. President Trump is, and as well as Netanyahu, has a very dirty dossier regarding for the making aggression and doing these criminal activities against the sovereign states and peoples.
Isn't it a cruel joke to tell people that Iran is a peace-loving country? If you look at the behavior of what's happened in the last few years, fueling support to Hamas and Hezbollah, accused by MI5 of carrying out plots in this country, endangering people here, saying that you want to destroy Israel, and you say you're a peace-loving country?
Yes, definitely we are the peace-loving country. And regarding for the MI5 report, we have several times requested to give us the evidences. Nothing done. Regarding for the Hamas and Hezbollah, they are doing for their own right to self-determination. According to that's a very principled right.
Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for your time and speaking to us today.
Thank you, Laura.
Well, as ever, we want to know what you think of what you hear this morning. You can email us kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk, or if you're social media minded, you can use the hashtag BBC Laura K, and the WhatsApp number is there for you too. Penny, President Trump said in his late night tweet about Keir Starmer that this war is already won. But when you listen to Iran and you listen to Israel, as we have done this morning, it seems that they are locked in something and neither of them is going to give up.
Well, look, firstly, thank you on behalf of us all, Laura, for not being delicate with that man. We should remember that outside of this conflict, Iran is attacking the UK every single week. It attacks our shipping, it attacks us in cyberspace. Don't get me started on their terrorist activities. The Foreign Secretary talks about our national interests, but unless you have strong armed forces, you cannot serve those interests. And unless you can deter our foes, you become a target. So my question is, what is it going to take for us all to wake up and recognise what is happening? We have to start investing in defence. Our chiefs have given us 4 years to transform and modernise our armed forces. The Treasury doesn't start spending money till year 5.
But you were part of successive Conservative governments that didn't find extra money for defence until late in the day. I know as Defence Secretary you argued for more cash, but as a party you did not put more money into defence when many people would say the red lights were flashing around the world.
Throughout my entire career, I have said this to chancellors. It's on the record. I've said it in public, from the back benches, from the front bench. I accept responsibility for that. But collectively as a nation, we have to wake up. I've been saying this for many, many years. We have got to start investing in defence. The consequences of us not doing that now are dire. I was talking to someone in the US administration that says potentially the next few decades are going to be the worst that humanity has ever lived through. And we are not prepared to face that.
Christiane, in terms of what the Israelis are hoping for, we heard there the president saying, oh, this is for Iranians to rise up, this is their opportunity. But you have lots of contacts in Iran, of course you have done for many years, and family also too. Is that possible with this level of chaos and destruction going on?
So here's the thing. I think you pushed the ambassador very, very well. He did not, and he was not able to answer why they've mowed down their own people during those social protests over the economy, which then morphed into down with the dictator, and they wanted the regime change. So clearly the US and Israel are banking on that sentiment to continue. There are two main prongs that the opposition, and also I guess Israel and the US want. One is, and this is very important, to keep attacking until there is a split in the regime or a crack in the system to enable quote-unquote defections. That has not happened yet. So they are expanding their targets. They're hitting oil depots and things and fuel depots around Tehran, lots of civilian targets as well, according to officials. But most importantly, they are waiting for this defection piece to determine the end of the war. They're also obviously doing the missile sites and the nuclear sites and all the rest of it.
But from the conversations and contacts you have, because it is impossible for us to report freely and fairly from inside Iran at the moment, is the chance of that high or low? Or
it's really unclear. Honestly, it's unclear. But at the moment, it's not happening. And most important signal, I thought, was after, anybody can criticize this terminology, but there are relative issues there. So there is a relative secular moderate who apologized to the Gulf states, right? Within 2 seconds, the hardline IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is pretty much in charge, said, no, sorry, that's wrong. So that you can see where the regime is now. It is not empowering those who would negotiate with the US, it's doing the opposite. And the second thing is that Ali Larijani, the national security guy, who's running the day-to-day operations, responded to Trump saying, we will not surrender. So it's very difficult, and Trump's rationale has changed every single hour
and every
since
single
this
day,
week.
and the Secretary of State and also his
and his DNI says you cannot change the regime from the sky. So we'll see what happens.
Zarah, you are someone on the left of politics, have very strong views that this war should not be happening at all. You were at one of the protests yesterday addressing the people who gathered to protest this. But what choice do you think the UK government really has here? We know that the Iranian regime does bad things to its own people. As Penny reminded us, it's also been doing things in this country. Just this week, there were arrests for people accused of spying for Iran here in the UK. What choice does the government have?
Well, 70% of the British public opposed joining this illegal war. And that demonstration that you referenced in London had up to 50,000 people marching, saying that we remember Iraq, we remember the lies, we remember the manufactured consent, we remember the death, the devastation and the instability that the Middle East has been left with, and we cannot go down that path again. And it's really interesting that the likes of Tony Blair are getting involved, saying that Keir Starmer should unconditionally support the US. If there was any justice in the world, he would be on trial at The Hague for the death of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis.
The government is doing. I mean, the government, as the Foreign Secretary was saying, we are not unquestioningly following Donald Trump. They are trying to take this delicate middle course, which may be politically difficult to explain. But what choice do they really have?
It's really interesting that Yvette Cooper says we're just involved in defensive operations. when the US Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has literally said UK bases will be used for the dramatic surge in attacks on Iran. So this is not about defensive operations, this is full-scale war, and we have given our complete endorsement by providing our bases, our typhoons, our assets in the Middle East.
Penny, you have been Defence Secretary, you've sat in the rooms where these decisions are taken. Is it possible to be just on the defensive side of a war?
Yes, it is. I mean, take the example of Op Shader, when we work alongside and we were part of that mission. We have different targeting policies, we have different capabilities, we have different risk appetite. So yes, that is perfectly normal. What is the missing bit from the government is what they think our national interests should be in this.
Have planes that leave the UK, that fly to Iran and drop bombs on the heads of people in Tehran or blow up an oil depot. That is this country facilitating those attacks. In what way is that just defensive?
People will be able to divide up what operations they're running from particular bases, and certainly we have been very clear, it seems, that we are restricting ourselves to defensive operations. That should include being able to take out drone launchers as well as drones, as Kemi Badenoch has pointed out.
Christiane, you've covered many conflicts around the world, not just in the Middle East. Do you think that position can hold for any country, the UK in this case, to be sort of in and out?
I don't know what the United Kingdom is going to do, but I agree with Penny, you can have defensive entry. You don't have to go all out. But what I want to say for the Iranian people, and this is clear, a vast majority want to change in that regime, okay? A vast, vast, vast majority. When Secretary of State Rubio briefed the United States Senate last week, I heard from the senators who said that they specifically asked him, does the United States have a plan to defend the people who they want to and who might come out to try to change the regime, or will they see it what happened, in January? And they were told the United States has no plan, because if the regime in some way stays in place and the people come out again to try to topple it, there's no plan to help them. And this is very important. Donald Trump himself has said there is no plan. He doesn't care what happens to Iran afterwards. No plan for democracy. He might even choose the Venezuela option. He said it over and again. But then he says, but we're killing all the people we want to negotiate with. So my focus as a reporter is on the Iranian people and what they can achieve and whether they're going to be slung under the bus by these people who are trying to determine their future.
Thank you, all three of you, for now. Well, politicians, of course, will continue for years, no doubt, to argue about the rights and wrongs of this conflict, who started it and whose job it is to end it. But the cost, of course, is being felt in lives and in livelihoods, and thousands of people whose worlds have been turned upside down, some seeking basic safety from the bombing, others wondering if their lives can ever be the same again. Tom Fletcher is the United Nations refugee chief, trying to do the best to help those fleeing danger, but warning about the consequences as this conflict continues to burn.
This is a moment of grave, grave peril right now. We're seeing a lot of unintended consequences to this military escalation. And across the region, we're seeing an massive impact on civilians. Hundreds of thousands displaced, needs rising very, very fast. But we're also seeing secondary impacts on places like Afghanistan, Pakistan, where needs were already great and where more people are being displaced. And then, of course, I have to worry about this as well. We're seeing all the other crises, South Sudan, Ukraine, slipping even further down the list. So I'm really worried at the moment. We are seeing right now this sustained attritional attack on the rule of law, on the institutions like the UN that are designed to prevent this kind of conflict. We've all got to take a deep breath. We need cool heads to prevail. We've got to step back from the brink right now.
But is anybody going to listen to that call when you have an American president who said publicly, I don't need international law, when you have Iran having ignored the pleas of the international community for years and years? Is anyone listening to the United Nations?
I fear they're not listening as much as I wish they would. We're in this sort of strongman moment right now, muscular geopolitics, people resorting far too soon to weapons, guns, warfare, rather than these institutions that we've built up with patience and at such cost, because after the Second World War, we realized the danger to common humanity if we don't have these places where we can actually settle our differences peacefully. Right now, we're not being heard, we're not being listened to. Our job is to keep shouting loudly, to keep speaking truth to power, and keep demanding protection of civilians and accountability for those behind the violence.
What would your message be to the UK Foreign Secretary this weekend?
My message to the UK Foreign Secretary, as to all governments, is stand up for international law, back humanitarian action, back our efforts to reach the hundreds of thousands of people who need help right now, in addition to the millions globally who we're already trying to reach, and try to bring people back to the table, try to bring people back to consensus and to the institutions that were built to prevent wars like this.
Tom Fletcher, thanks so much for speaking to us. And of course, this is all having huge impacts on politics here at home. Robert Jenrick from Reform is with us in the studio. Thank you for coming in.
Good morning.
Nigel Farage described the Prime Minister as a coward for what he said was inaction in this war. Should the UK join Israel and America in attacking Iran?
Well, look, we will always put the interests of the British people first. I think that's what matters the most. We don't see a cause for the UK to be deploying our personnel, such as airmen, offensively in bombing raids over Iran. As far as I'm aware, we've not been asked to do that. But have big mistakes been made? Yes, absolutely. Should we have used our bases and given those to the United States from the outset? Yes, absolutely. And the vacillation of the Prime Minister has damaged relationships with the United States significantly, with allies elsewhere, such as in the Gulf. Should we have put assets into the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean to protect our base in Cyprus? Yes, I think it's one of the worst failures of military planning in recent years that the United States could build up the biggest armada in that region in a generation, and Keir Starmer didn't bring a single ship into the region. We had to rely on the French
to
defend our base in Cyprus.
The government did
that was astonishing.
The government did send many, many jets, but in essence...
But not a single ship.
But on principle, you're saying basically you're criticising the pace of the UK response, but on principle your position is basically the same as the government. Don't join the attacks directly. Provide the Americans with access to our British bases. So if your position's basically the same, why is your leader calling Keir Starmer a coward? Isn't that
because
politics?
The vacillation and incompetence of Keir Starmer and the government in not providing those bases from the outset, worrying about vague notions of international law and his own backbenchers in the Labour Party, have caused immense damage, potentially lasting damage, to our relationships in the United States and elsewhere. And they did endanger, remember, our personnel and their families in Cyprus, because those drones fell, which was not necessary. They could have been intercepted if the most basic planning had been done. But if you're asking me the question, do I think that it is in the interests of the British people, and at the end of the day, that is what matters to Reform, for us to be deploying British airmen in bombing raids over Iran right now, when our allies have not asked us to do that, then no, I don't think that's necessary. We shouldn't be endangering British personnel unnecessarily.
But if the United States asked Britain to join in those strikes in an offensive way, would Reform's answer be yes? Because your colleague Richard Tice said we would help the Americans in any way they saw appropriate.
Well, we will put the interests of the British public first, and as a rule of thumb, Laura, we will be very cautious before deploying British troops overseas into offensive action.
Well, that's not what your colleague Richard Tice said. He said if requests were made, we'd have said yes, we're pleased to help.
That's for using our bases, joint bases, for example, like Diego Garcia. And frankly, it's ridiculous that we haven't enabled the US, or didn't initially, to use that base, which has been a cornerstone of our defence since the 1970s. But we haven't been asked. Our allies are proceeding with this action without us. And I think it's perfectly sensible for us to protect the security of our own troops first. What we also want to see, Laura, is this war come to an end as quickly as possible. Because at the end of the day, Reform is a party for working people, and working people are being clobbered as a result of rising energy bills. The energy bills are going to go up in people's homes and businesses in the weeks ahead. Next week, no doubt, we'll see prices at the pumps for petrol and diesel start to go up yet again, just at a time when everyone is hard up in the country.
And you want to be the Chancellor.
And we want to ensure those people are properly looked after.
Power, so what would you do?
Well, firstly, I want to see Rachel Reeves take action to bring down people's bills, cut the green levies, cut the unnecessary taxes that we already see. Obviously, make use of every last drop of oil and gas that is in the North Sea for our own energy security. And yes, as I asked Rachel Reeves in the House of Commons during the week, cancel the increase in fuel duty, because later this year, at the worst possible time, she's going to be hiking people's taxes when they fill up at the pumps. And those people right now are finding life tough. We need to lighten the load on them, and that is the first thing that she could do to help them.
But the government would say it's very short of money. It's got to get income from somewhere. You know there's not money to spend, to sort of spray around. So where would that money come from if you cancelled the fuel duty rise?
Well, by cutting waste. Look at what we're seeing at the moment, left, right and centre, on asylum hotels, on benefits for migrants, on net zero commitment. There's billions and billions of pounds that could be cut, that could then be helping working people, making their lives easier at this moment of immense pressure. Reform is for working people. We want to ensure that we're doing everything possible to lighten the load on the cost of living right now.
And we'll talk to you about that in great detail on another occasion, I'm sure. But today, on this busy day, we must leave it there. Robert Jenrick, thanks very much indeed for coming in. Well, this tense conversation about what's happening in the Middle East is happening when millions of you are about to be asked to make a big decision about what's happening here. Mega May is in about 8 weeks' time, a huge set of elections, local councils in England and elections for the Senate in Wales and Holyrood in Scotland. So this week, in the latest of our 2026 interviews with the party leaders, I sat down with Scotland's First Minister, John Swinney.
The United States and Israel, I think, have embarked on an action that is incompatible with the international rules-based system, and that obviously creates a very difficult backdrop for the conduct of the United Kingdom government in this conflict. I think what the Prime Minister said is an illustration of how these situations can get out of control very, very quickly. I'm acutely concerned about is that the Prime Minister's stance that this is essentially a defensive move to make available UK bases and UK resources for the cooperation with the Americans can very quickly become viewed as an offensive mechanism, and we get caught up very quickly in the conflict.
There are clearly all sorts of dangers all around, but would you not allow the United States to use British bases for what the Prime Minister says are defensive purposes?
I think the difficulty is how you maintain that position about the defensive stance. I understand why that's necessary and why the Prime Minister has had to contemplate that because of the risks that are being faced by British people and British service personnel.
But do you think, if you were in Keir Starmer's seat, would you allow the Americans to use British bases for defensive purposes or not?
I understand why the United Kingdom has got to protect our own people. That is the fundamental duty of the United Kingdom government. But the UK has been placed in a position, a very dangerous position, because of the actions of the Americans and the Israelis. What I'm saying is there has to be a very, very constrained use of those bases for the purposes of protecting our citizens and nothing else.
But forgive me, First Minister, your position, although expressed differently, sounds pretty much the same as the Prime Minister. He said, fine, use the bases, but only to defend British assets, whether that's civilians or the military in the wider region.
Well, I'm giving a very explicit warning about my worries about escalation, and I think the focus has to be on de-escalation. It has to be on securing a diplomatic solution to this conflict.
Are you allowing Prestwick Airport, not that far from Glasgow, to be used by the American military?
We're seeking clarity from the United Kingdom government about the purpose of American flights that are coming in and out of Prestwick Airport. We don't have the ability to scrutinise those flights.
If American military flights are going through Prestwick in order to be part of launching strikes on the Middle East, would you stop that? Would you ban that? Formerly, the SNP government did stop the Israeli military using Prestwick Airport. After all, it's owned by the government.
Well, that's something that I would explore, yes.
So
but I need the information to enable me to take that decision.
Let's talk about an issue of huge concern to many people in Scotland. Scotland's biggest hospital, the Queen Elizabeth in Glasgow. Now, there is an inquiry into what happened, but between 2017 and 2021, at least 84 children developed infections because of concerns around dirty water. There have been deaths at that hospital linked to the failings. You met with the families who've got great concern about the deaths in some cases and the harm in some cases caused to their families by mistakes, infection at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, the biggest in Scotland. What did you say to those families?
Well, first of all, I expressed my regret for the experiences of families and in some cases for the loss of children who had been cared for in the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. I said to the families that fundamentally I believe the hospital is a safe hospital on the basis of all of the data that I have available to me. But we have a public inquiry that is looking at the original construction and development of the hospital and the issues that have emerged as a consequence. It's important.
Did you apologise to the families who lost loved ones when you saw them yesterday?
Yeah, of course I did, yes.
And do you regret that SNP governments successively didn't take red flags about that hospital seriously enough?
Well, I would contest that point because we set up a public inquiry. So we accepted...
It's nearly 10 years there have been problems at that hospital and a ward's been shut this week because of problems.
I think the SNP government responded to the concerns of members of the public by the establishment of a public inquiry, which was preceded also by individual case reviews of the circumstances and the treatment of individuals. And then in the here and now, where issues arise, where there are problems, the Scottish Government, through NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, is addressing those issues.
If you win in May, as opinion polls suggest that you might, the SNP will have been, getting on for 2 decades in power, but not really closer to achieving the ultimate goal of your party, which is for Scotland to be an independent country. What direction do you think you're really taking this country in?
So I think it's now pretty clear in opinion polls that there is a sustained majority support for independence in Scotland.
Is it?
Yes, if you look at the pattern of opinion polls, I think it is pretty clear there is a majority support for independence in Scotland. And what my politics are about doing 2 things. About working at all times to serve the people of Scotland and to make our country more successful and to deliver better outcomes for people in Scotland, but then to enable the country to take the choice about our future and to make sure that Scotland's future is in Scotland's hands. And that's by becoming an independent country. I've said that if we get a majority in the Scottish Parliament, which is my aim, then that will be a repetition of the circumstances in 2011, and what that led to was a referendum on independence, and that's exactly what should happen. That will be my priority.
Do you think Keir Starmer would listen if you asked for another referendum?
Well, I don't think Keir Starmer would be the Prime Minister if I win a majority in the election in May.
Do you think he'll be gone?
I think he definitely will be gone, yes.
Would you serve a full term if you win as First Minister?
Yes.
First Minister John Swinney, thanks very much for speaking to us. Well, we'll see. It's a long time to those elections. And of course, right now, everyone in the political world is focusing what's happening in the Middle East. Penny, I just wonder, I know you care a lot about the armed forces. Your party leader said that UK jets were just hanging around. Should she say sorry for that?
Let's deal with this. Does Kemi Badenoch respect our armed forces? Yes, she does. What was she talking about there? She was talking about hitting drone launchers, not just drones. But all of this is, I'm afraid, an irrelevance. You're going to have number 10.
It's not irrelevant to some members of the armed forces. If the opposition leader says, oh, they're just hanging around, should she just say sorry and then move on?
You're going to have number 10 briefing this stuff out. They're going to start putting stories out shortly about our defence chiefs.
The leader of the opposition said it on the BBC breakfast television sofa.
All of this is a total distraction, Laura, from the fact that our government eyeballed the citizens of this country and the President of the United States and said it would start to increase defence expenditure. It's not planning to do that for 5 years. That warship that's still parked in Portsmouth cost British taxpayers £1 billion.
So she shouldn't say
it can't get to sea, it can't get welders and spare parts. They're sat on the equipment programme, and they have been for some time. They have got to start taking it seriously. And it's going to take, I'm afraid, this is what I'm worried about, members of our armed forces, who we do respect, and potentially British citizens actually being killed before this country wakes up.
Zarah, this government promises that they'll tell us more about defence spending. They have committed to helping America, although they say not by targeting economic infrastructure in Iran, but going after missile sites. Can you see a way out of this anytime soon?
Well, already over 1,300 people have been killed in Iran, over 200 in Lebanon. There have been attacks on hospital schools, including the school in Minar where over 180 children were killed, predominantly schoolgirls in this war apparently to liberate women. The UK government has to call on an end to the attacks on Iran and Lebanon. We need to end all arms sales, military cooperation, and we have to seek a path that is diplomatic. And Keir Starmer needs to stop being Donald Trump's poodle, and we need to have an independent
Well, it
foreign
seems
policy.
to have fallen out with them quite spectacularly, but we'll see what happens in that relationship. Christiane, can you see a way out of this anytime soon?
At the moment, no, but I can tell you from insiders, from dissident, or rather opposition politicians, their main aim is the defection piece. There won't be, they think, a regime change unless the internal military structure changes, and that's going to be the most telling thing. And then the other thing is, just this is a view from Iran, if you have a second, that was posted recently.
We have a few seconds.
Yeah, okay. You know, in a sentence, Iran is a nation held hostage by its own regime, but haunted by the fate of its neighbors, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. We are stuck in a house we hate, surrounded by fires we fear more.
Invaluable to have those kind of perspectives from inside the country. Of course, it's very hard to speak to people in Iran in an easy way. Thank you, all three of you, so much for your perspectives this morning. Thank you to all our guests today, and thank you most of all to you for watching at home. It's a time where we are trying to make sense of the turmoil we're all living through. It's not always easy to absorb everything, and it's not easy for our politicians to make decisions either. But of course, most of all, it's far from easy for those millions of people living in that part of the world with so many dangers and so much disruption. I'll be with Paddy O'Connell on Newscast a bit later, wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch anything again on iPlayer. And of course, I'll look forward to seeing you, whatever's happened next, on BBC One next Sunday, same time, same place.